City's construction sites to the courtrooms. This is Hard Hats and Justice, where real stories of injured workers and their fight for justice come to life. Presented by Gorayeb and Associates, PC, standing up for New York's workforce for over 40 years. And now, the host of Hard Hats and Justice, Chris Gorayeb.
It was a Monday morning, and Maria went to her job as a laborer in Midtown Manhattan. And before lunch, her life completely changed. My name's Chris Gorayeb, and this is our first episode of Hard Hats and Justice. If you're a construction worker or know someone who is a construction worker in New York City, then this broadcast is for you. We're going to be talking about construction accidents in New York, the effect that they have upon the construction workers, their families, and the types of compensation that construction workers can receive when they're hurt. I look forward to explaining all of this to you. On that Monday, Maria went to work as she had done for 6 months at this job site in Manhattan, working as a laborer. And on this day, she climbed up onto a sidewalk bridge. She began her work. And then without warning, she stood on a rotten OSHA plank that broke and caused Maria to fall 20 feet. But before she hit the ground, her back landed on a cross brace, breaking multiple of her thoracic vertebrae, rendering this 41-year-old woman, a single mother of a learning disabled child, paraplegic. As a result of that, her life completely changed. And let me explain to you what now happened. She was hospitalized for 2 months. She was in rehabilitation for another 3 months. She had trouble receiving workers' compensation because initially her employer denied that she was employed by that company. But she hired us, Gorayeb and Associates, and we were able to obtain her workers' compensation. We then brought a lawsuit against the owner of the building and the general contractor, who both were responsible for making sure that this job site was safe, making sure that the planks weren't rotten, making sure that she had a lifeline and a harness to prevent her from falling in the event that something like a plank did break. But they did none of these things for her. You're going to hear that Maria is protected by something that's known in New York as the Scaffolding Law. It's a law that was enacted more than 100 years ago, and it's unique to New York State. The reason why the Scaffolding Law is unique to New York State is because no other state has a statute like it, but luckily New York does. And the reason why New York does is because we have so much construction in New York, high-rise buildings. We have a statute in New York City that requires that every 5 years, a building over 6 stories must be inspected on its exterior. A sidewalk bridge must be installed. Workers must climb scaffolds to inspect the buildings. And every time one of those buildings is inspected, there's the chance for a terrible accident to occur. There is an effort in New York to repeal that scaffold law. The people who want to repeal the law are those building owners and contractors and their insurance companies that have to compensate people like Maria for the injuries that they sustain. And they don't like compensating. They want to collect premiums and not pay. The problem with it is that someone like Maria and the thousands of construction workers that are hurt in New York every single year would be unable to obtain real compensation if it were not for the scaffolding law. The scaffolding law is the only thing that workers can turn to other than workers' compensation. And workers' compensation provides marginal benefits for only a very short period of time. Were it not for the scaffolding law, people would be rendered paraplegic, maimed, they lose arms, put in positions where they can't work and support their families with nowhere to turn. We live in a society right now where there's an effort to restrict our people's access to medical care, making it more difficult to obtain medical care, making insurance much more expensive. And without the scaffolding law, thousands, tens of thousands of people would be put in a position where they would be maimed, unable to work, unable to support their families, with nowhere to turn, not even to the government. There are efforts now to even change the scaffolding law so that the law wouldn't apply to buildings where the federal government has provided financing. And you have to ask yourself, who would work on those buildings, knowing that they would be exposed to the dangers of construction, but unable to obtain compensation when they're badly hurt? You know, the statistics in New York are incredible. Almost every hour, 2 construction workers get hurt. In 2023, 30 construction workers in New York City were killed in construction accidents. 39% of the deaths in construction accidents are the result of falls from ladders, from scaffolds, from beams, from roofs. Statistically, and it's hard to believe, that if you work in construction for approximately 35 years, there's a 75% chance that you are going to sustain a serious disabling injury. Construction is one of the most dangerous jobs that anyone can do. And it's one of the most essential jobs that we as a society need. Whether schools are being built, homes are being constructed, apartments are being constructed, office buildings are being constructed, bridges and highways are being constructed. We need construction workers. And all of the people that work in those jobs run the risk of being injured to the point where they'll no longer be able to work, no longer be able to support their families, no longer be able to pay their bills. That's why the construction laws are so important. And that's what we do here to protect construction workers. We even run classes providing the ability for construction workers to obtain OSHA certification so that accidents won't happen. But unfortunately, even with the best training, these accidents occur. And without the scaffolding law, not only will more construction workers be hurt, but the owners and the contractors will no longer have incentive to provide protections to these workers. Why? Because they won't have to pay them if they get hurt. And individuals who are working on construction sites will more than likely be treated as disposable labor. And the less connection you have, the more disposable you become. Union workers, they're more protected. But if you're not in the union, you don't get trained, you have nowhere to turn. If you complain to the boss, what happens? The boss fires you because someone else is going to be looking for that job. We know of many instances, thousands of instances. We've represented almost 13,000 construction workers where an accident occurs and the boss won't call an ambulance. The boss will tell a worker, go home. If you need to go to the hospital, tell them that your accident happened at home. And why would they do that? They do that so that if a claim is ever made, the boss can say, there was no accident. He reported it at home. There was no ambulance. There's no proof of an accident. All they want to do, the contractors, the owners of the buildings, the insurance companies themselves, is save money, collect premiums, and pay nothing. They don't care what happens to the construction worker, to his family, or to his future. My job is to explain all of this and to seek compensation for those individuals. So whenever you're working as a construction worker, or really in any job, but we're talking about construction, there are a lot of people that want to pay you in cash. But the problem with being paid in cash is that the boss can deny that they know who you are when an accident occurs. The boss can deny how much they were paying you. And that then affects your ability to receive workers' compensation. Because if you're not getting paid in cash, because if you're getting paid in cash, there's no proof that you're working for a particular company. And there's no proof of how much money you're getting paid. So if it's possible, get paid by check. It protects you in the event that there's an accident. If you do have an accident, report it. Call an ambulance. Report it to the job super, to site safety. Document your accident. When you go to the hospital, don't ever allow the boss to tell you to say that you got hurt somewhere else, at home. Tell the truth. Report the accident. The bosses may tell you, say you got hurt at home, don't worry, we'll pay your bills. And then once you do that, you put yourself in a position where it's going to be much more difficult to prove that you had an accident. When you do have an accident in construction, you have two potential cases. You have a case for workers' compensation. Everyone in New York who gets hurt while they're working for a company always has one case. The case that they have is for workers' compensation. Workers' compensation pays your medical bills and some of the money you lose because you can't work. It's important to hire an attorney to represent you in a workers' compensation case. I've been an attorney now for almost 40 years representing injured construction workers. But if I had an accident, I would hire a workers' compensation lawyer because it's an area of the law that requires real expertise. The second case you have when you're a construction worker is the case that we've been talking about, the case under what is called the Scaffolding Law, but it's much broader than that. You can have this second case when you have an eye injury, or you're using a table saw that's unguarded, or you trip and fall, or something even falls on you. And when that happens, there are at least 3 different types of compensation that you can receive. You receive compensation for medical bills from the day of the accident, including ambulance, doctors, hospitals, surgery, workers' compensation, all the way up until when the case ends. But for those that are continue to be injured and require medical care, you can recover money to pay your future medical bills for however long you're going to need that, for your lifetime if necessary. The second category of compensation is compensation for the money you lose because you can't work or your ability to work is affected. If you're making $1,000 a week and you can't work any longer, you're losing approximately $50,000 a year. And without raises, if you worked for another 20 years, you would lose $1 million. With raises, of course, that would be much more. Even if you were able to go back and get another job, if you were earning less money than you were earning before, that difference would be part of your case. And then lastly, the law allows you to recover compensation for the pain you experience and the changes in your life that occur from that pain. Pain from the day of the accident up until when the case finishes, and then into the future for however long you will experience that pain. But the law recognizes that the pain changes your life. And usually there's 2 types of changes that occur when you have an accident. The first change that happens is you find out, I can't do the things I used to be able to do. I can't walk. I can't run. I can't work. I can't exercise. I can't do things with my children, with my wife, with my friends. I can't pay my bills. But the second thing you find out is that because of this accident, now you're doing things that you never did before. I'm going to hospitals. I'm taking medicine, maybe having operations, physical therapy. I'm going to lawyers. Now, as a result of this accident, I'm worrying about my bills. I'm worrying about my rent. I'm worrying about my mortgage. Now, instead of taking care of myself and taking care of my family, I'm asking people to take care of me. And the law recognizes that all of these things happen when someone is hurt. And the law allows you to have compensation. And for those women out there who are married and their husbands get hurt, the law also allows you to have your own case, because the law recognizes that what happens to one also affects the other. Some of you have children, and now your husband gets hurt. And when your husband gets hurt, you end up with another child, some very big, who ends up crying a lot. And the law recognizes that and entitles you to compensation for that. So the law, the scaffolding law, the laws we use to protect construction workers after an accident provide far more compensation, or the ability, the opportunity to obtain compensation, than simply workers' compensation, which pays a limited amount of money if you can't work and will only pay you for a maximum of 10 years, if that, and with great difficulty to try to get workers' compensation to pay. That's why we need these protections. That's why we need the labor law. That's why we need the scaffolding law, because without that, construction workers, the people of the state of New York, will have nowhere to turn. And we'll have people living in boxes on the sidewalks because they're unable to work, they're unable to support their families. That's what attorneys like I do. We help people. We help families. We give them back the financial security that they've lost because they were injured, because laws were violated, and owners and contractors didn't care at all what happens to these people. I'm Chris Gorayeb. Thank you for listening to Hard Hats and Justice. I've enjoyed very much explaining to you some of what we do here. And if you want more information, go to our website, and I look forward to seeing you again and speaking to you about what we do here as a profession. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to Hard Hats and Justice, where the voices of New York's workers are heard, honored, and defended. Brought to you by Gorayeb and Associates, PC, fighting for the rights of injured workers for more than 40 years. If you or someone you know has been hurt on the job, visit us anytime at Gorayeb.com. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and keep standing up for justice.